The movie opens by showing Bill and Joe Harding, a married couple on the verge of divorcing one another, as well as Melissa, Bill's lover, is forced to stay together when Bill and Joe team up to develop an advanced weather alert system by placing themselves in the path of extremely dangerous tornadoes. In 1969, there was a young girl named Jo Thornton living on a farm in Oklahoma with her parents and their dog. Her father saw the news of an F5 tornado and rushed to evacuate the house with the whole family, almost leaving the dog behind. They stayed in the dugout basement to keep themselves safe, but the tornado was so strong that it destroyed the door that was being held back by Joe's father, causing him to get sucked in and die. 27 years later, Joe was seen working on a broken radar. She developed an interest in chasing tornadoes and became a meteorologist, leading a disorganized group of storm chasers. While they were working, Joe's husband, Bill Harding, who used to be a storm chaser just like Joe but is now a TV weatherman, arrived with his current girlfriend, Melissa Reeves, who is a therapist. Bill is planning on marrying his current girlfriend, and to do that, he must divorce Joe first. So Bill and Melissa decided to visit Joe in Oklahoma to get the divorce papers from her. When they arrived, Bill introduced Melissa to another storm chaser named Dusty and left her alone with him for a while so he could go and talk to Joe. Joe saw him but continued working, planning on making Bill wait, but when Bill told her that he needed the signed divorce papers already so he could marry Melissa, Joe lost her smile. Joe then gave the signed divorce papers to Bill, but was called back by the latter again when Bill noticed that Joe hadn't signed the other pages yet. When she learned that Melissa was also there, getting entertained by Dusty, Joe approached her and introduced herself. Joe then approached Bill's car, and when the latter followed after her, Joe admitted that she used the divorce papers to lure Bill so she could show him Dorothy, a capsule-like device that Bill designed. Bill got excited to hear about Dorothy, and Joe led him to the car where the device was. Bill saw Melissa approaching and showed off Dorothy to his girlfriend, explaining what Dorothy was. Dorothy is a device that Bill conceptualized to make studying the storm easier. It contains hundreds of small weather sensors that would fly into the storm to detect the tornado's movements. The device would have to get into the tornado and release the small weather sensors to measure all parts of the tornado simultaneously. Bill and Joe explained everything about Dorothy to Melissa, but the latter was still confused about it. Melissa asked how they were going to get the device into the tornado, and Bill answered that they would have to deploy the device in the path of the tornado so the tornado could suck it in. Joe's team then received a report about an incoming tornado and immediately left to chase the incoming storm. Realizing that Joe hadn't signed the papers yet, Bill and Melissa followed. On their way, they saw Jonas Miller going the same way as them. Jonas is another storm chaser who has been a rival to Bill. Bill radioed Joe and asked her why Jonas was there, but Joe didn't know why either. While they were talking, one of Jonas' teammates overtook Bill's car, which swerved to avoid crashing against them and ended up driving over metal and damaging the tires. They stopped over for a while to get the tires fixed, and Bill saw Jonas getting an interview about a new device he made. Bill was enraged when he saw that Jonas' new device was exactly like his and realized that Jonas stole his idea of Dorothy and was planning on releasing his version first to take full credit. Joe stopped Bill from fighting with Jonas, telling him that Jonas' version of Dorothy wouldn't work. Jonas then smugly told them about the features of his device and confidently stated that it was better than Bill's Dorothy. Before he entered the dinner, Jonas mocked Bill for being a weatherman one last time, triggering Bill, who agreed to go with Joe's team in launching Dorothy for only one day. Inside the diner, Jonas approached Joe to talk smack about Bill and to also get some information from her regarding the storm. But Joe just disregarded him and went to the counter beside Melissa. Joe told Melissa about Bill's strange ability to know what a storm is thinking, calling him a human barometer. Staring at Joe, Melissa suddenly questioned if she was still in love with Bill, and Joe avoided the question. Meanwhile, Bill stayed outside watching the sky, and when he noticed that it was going green, he called for everyone, and they left. Followed by Jonas' team, Bill went with Joe, while Melissa followed behind Dusty's car while talking with her patient over the phone. Joe tried to start a conversation with Bill about Melissa, but Bill was getting too defensive, assuming that Joe was going to start a fight. The supposedly friendly conversation Joe was going for ended up in an argument, and the two of them didn't realize that the tornado had already started. When they realized this, their anger turned into excitement as they chased down the developing rope tornado. Bill swerved towards the ditch and tried to escape the nearby tornado coming their way. When they were met with a small bridge ahead of them, they stepped out of the vehicle and went under the bridge to keep safe as the tornado destroyed their vehicle. Once the tornado passed, Joe's team stopped by the bridge, followed by Melissa's car, which almost got hit by Joe's truck that fell from the sky. Bill ran to Melissa and comforted her, while Joe, who seemed to be jealous of Bill and Melissa, approached her destroyed truck. They saw Jonah's team approaching and watched as he just passed by them. Dusty made fun of them for being fashionably late while Joe broke her destroyed car's window and took her stuff from inside it. Since her truck and the first Dorothy had been destroyed, Bill and Joe decided to use Bill and Melissa's car to chase the tornado with the second Dorothy. Jonas was ahead of Joe's team when Bill appeared and drove alongside his car. Jonas was confused as Bill suddenly stopped his car. Bill noticed the updraft's angle and accurately predicted that the tornado was going to shift its track to the left. They drove backward and changed their course to intercept the storm. As they were driving through an isthmus, two waterspouts formed, with one of them splitting into two and moving towards them. The two waterspouts surrounded them and thrashed their car around before dissipating. Melissa was traumatized because of what had occurred, but Bill and Joe were excited as they stepped out of the car and Bill spun Joe around. When Bill noticed Melissa, he snapped out of his excitement and comforted her, while Joe cheered with the whole team, who were practically begging her to visit her Aunt Meg, who was living nearby. They visited Aunt Meg, who was happy to see Bill and the whole team and had a nice meal together. They watched the news that showed Jonas, who was indirectly mocking them as he bragged about chasing the storm. They turned off the news and told Melissa embarrassing stories about Bill before the conversation changed to tornadoes. They mentioned up to an F4 tornado, and when Melissa asked if there was an F5 tornado, everyone went silent. Among all of them, Joe was the only one who had ever seen an F5 tornado, which resulted in her father's death, who was in her room, and it was revealed that Joe still had feelings left for Bill, but couldn't do anything about them anymore as Bill was moving on with Melissa. They got news of another storm a while later, and they hurried to leave so they could catch it. They drove through fields and brush until they reached the highway and almost crashed against Jonah's team. They drove out of Jonah's team and turned right, as told by Bill. They went up the hill where they knew the tornado was going to start, and while the rest of the team stopped, Bill and Joe went straight to the core and Bill set Dorothy out. When Dorothy was all set, Joe stopped the car and helped Bill get Dorothy down, but a wooden electric pole exploded and fell on top of the car, hitting Dorothy in the process. Then the tornado suddenly vanished, leaving everyone confused. They waited for a while, and when they realized that the tornado was building again, Bill immediately forcibly put Joe in the car as she was refusing to leave. He backed the car up, but the tornado disappeared again, and Joe stepped out of the car, rushing to pick up the fallen sensors. Bill confronted Joe, who was obsessing over catching a tornado, and told her that killing herself over a tornado wouldn't bring her father back. On the other hand, their argument was heard through the CB radio, and Melissa was listening to them. Melissa listened as Bill told Joe to move on from the past and see him. That's when Melissa realized that Bill was still in love with Joe, and the only reason he left her in the first place was because Joe became so obsessed with tornadoes that she forgot about him. The team stayed the night in a small town while their cars were being repaired. Joe signed the divorce papers and was approached by Bill. They saw the shop's TV acting up and checked the dark sky when they noticed that it got windy and there were thunderstorms. The whole team was horrified when they saw an F4 tornado heading towards them. The tornado was already so close, and they didn't have enough time to evacuate the town. So Joe's team urged everyone to get inside a garage for protection. The town was in shambles because of the tornado that passed and went straight to Wakita, where Aunt Meg lives. The team prepared to leave in a rush to go to Wakita, and Bill told Melissa that he was going with them. Melissa broke up with Bill then and told the latter not to worry about her and that Joe needs him more than she does. So while Melissa went home by herself, Bill and Joe's team drove to Wakita, passing by the victims of the tornado. They saw Aunt Meg's house, which was destroyed, and Joe frantically searched for her. They went inside the house and found Aunt Meg's dog at the bottom. Joe's team arrived shortly after and helped Joe and Aunt Meg out while Bill went back inside the house to get Aunt Meg's dog. As soon as he left the house with the dog in his arms, the house collapsed. Inside the ambulance, Aunt Meg comforted Joe, telling her to stop blaming herself as she was still safe in the end. Dusty approached them and informed Joe that the National Severe Storms Laboratory was predicting an F5. Aunt Meg reassured Joe that she could stop the F5 as Joe spent most of her life chasing tornadoes. The ambulance left and Joe approached Joe, who was staring at Aunt Meg's large wind vane sculptures. The two of them seemed to have realized something, and Joe ordered the whole team to find every aluminum can they could find. Using the aluminum cans, they added aluminum wings to the last two Dorothy devices and pursued the massive F5 tornado the next day. Bill and Joe approached the tornado and placed the third Dorothy in its path. However, instead of flying, Dorothy just got knocked down by a tree branch that flew out of the tornado. Bill and Joe entered the car and a tree branch hit them from the back. Due to this, they couldn't get the car to move. A truck flew out of the tornado and hit their car, enabling them to drive away from the tornado as the truck exploded. On the other hand, Jonas approached the tornado to deploy their version of Dorothy. Bill and Joe warned him as the tornado was changing courses and heading towards them. But Jonas disregarded their warnings, which resulted in their deaths as the car got swept away before crashing to the ground and exploding. Bill and Joe just kept driving away, avoiding falling debris on their way, and when a whole house blocked their way all of a sudden, they crashed through it and continued on their way. Joe set the last Dorothy up, and Bill drove straight towards the tornado. When they got near the storm, they jumped out of the car and watched as the small sensors got released from the device and the tornado sucked the car in. The whole team celebrated as they witnessed Dorothy fly into the tornado. Their happiness was cut short as they realized that the tornado was heading northeast, directly towards Jill and Bill, who ran away from the tornado on foot. Bill and Joe ran inside the barn and went out on the other side as the tornado destroyed the barn. When they saw a nearby pump house, they got inside it and strapped themselves to deep pipes as the tornado passed over them. Bill and Joe got a close view of the tornado's car as they were right under the eye of the storm. When the F5 tornado finally passed, Joe and Bill were still so happy even after almost getting swirled around by the tornado. The team arrived and celebrated their success. Right in front of the whole team, Joe and Bill were still so happy even after almost getting swirled around by the tornado. Joe and Bill reconciled and locked their lips together. What do you think of this recap? Please drop all your thoughts in the comments section below. One like from you and maybe subscribing would be a great support for us. And that's it for now. See you in the next videos.